Good morning. I'm Takahiro Yasuda, Chief Architect at Sony Media Networks, Japanese marketing technology company in Sony Group. I will talk about my Aerospike experience in past 8 years. Here my my company's summary. In the last 8 years, our ad business had a great success with Aerospikes. In this April, our company went public, listed on first section of Tokyo Stock Exchange. One of the reasons of this success is Aerospike. We thanks Aerospike so much. Our service is LTV, ad buying platform. In other words, demand side platform, DSP, similar to trade desks. The service name is Logicad. Logicad is connected with a lot of ad exchanges, SSPs, such as Google, AppNexus, Microsoft, and Japanese local companies. In a nutshell, all devices in Japan. Here is a simple example of Logicad ads. This is he has visited a travel site with this browser some time ago. So this time he visited this Microsoft page. Then Logicad decided to buy this ad space in real time and create the like a travel ad banner for this browser. We call this kind of ads programmatic ad or personalized ad. Here is a real-time ad system summary. Step 1, a user visits a page with ad space. Step 2, SSP such as Google make an auction for each page view. SSP server send a bid request to our buyer servers. Step 3 and 4, our buyer server determine the bidding price for this auction. Step 5, if our server win the auction, browser show the ad. Total time is less than 100 milliseconds. It's a very short time. The information for the bidding is page URL, browser user agent, and historical user data, which are stored in Aerospikes. In this system, bid request transaction is 250,000 per second. One bid request spawns 2 Aerospike reads. Therefore, Aerospike read volume is 500,000 read per second. The win rate of ad auction is 20% at most. As a result, Aerospike write volume is 50,000 per second. If I use MySQL, these numbers are incredible numbers. Maybe I cannot handle it. However, we use Aerospike, so these numbers are capable. Yeah, it was great. We use Aerospike for 8 years as our central database. First time I met Aerospike was at 2011. At that time, I had just started a new system for new R service, and I was seeking key value stores. R system needs billions key and over tera data, even at 8 years ago. So at that time, I tested Redis, MongoDB, and Tokyo, Thailand, Kumohes, these are Japanese product, etc. I finally choose Aerospike, which was formerly named Citrus Leaf. So I like both names. The reason why I choose Aerospikes are Aerospike uses SSD, which means more cost-effective than memory-based key value stores. Cluster scalability and stability are significant for my service growth and reliable operations. Aerospike's cluster operation, like adding and removing servers, are more smooth and less performance degradation than any other products. These were very important point of choosing Aerospike. This graph shows the bit request transaction from 2020 to 2019. The more my business is growing, the more bit request transaction we are buying. The latest number is 200,000 transactions per second. The monthly total is 300 billion transactions. The current architecture is almost the same as 8 years ago. So this is wonderful. Most helpful for my engineering teams. If big architecture change happen, it would be very tough project. Every engineer don't like big changes. In the last 8 years, transaction increased 50 times. However, cluster size increased only 2 times. Of course, we scale up latest CPU with many core and latest SSD such as Intel Optane. And another most helpful things for me are Aerospike did not have any single cluster stop for 8 years. We often add and remove servers in case scaling out or hardware failure. The Aerospike clusters has always handled it and keep running normally. Yeah, it's great things. So next, I will talk about a little about light design. When we used Aerospike for the first time, we faced a hotkey problem. It was an 8 years ago story. In typical use case, Aerospike store over million user data. Yes, of course, we use it as the same. In addition to that, I thought I store add budget information in Aerospike. This is because Aerospike was so reliable, and I did not want to use any other additional database. Additional database causes additional operation cost and additional more complexity. Aerospike worked fine. However, I faced a hotkey problem. Multi-worker, multi-client writes the same key concurrently. So add cost key is add campaign ID, which has low cardinality. So sometimes Aerospike key busy error happen. To avoid it, I stop each write. Instead, before write, I sum up merge same key values, then write it. It's a batch write. It worked well, and now worked. So this is, I will talk about two cluster operation. In our system, there are two clusters in most time. For writing one message to two clusters, I use RabbitMQ exchange functions. RabbitMQ is a messaging middleware. It's very stable, easy to use, a convenient queue service. My Tomcat Java application server received the HTTP request, such as impression, went through a message to RabbitMQ. Its exchange function duplicate a message and put each message to two queue. Each queue have each worker. Each worker writes a message to each Aerospike. Two cluster running means that I can do upgrade operation for one side cluster. It is a very safe operation. If I miss the operation, it is okay. It does not affect main services, main ad service. Sometimes I build a new cluster from scratch for upgrade. After upgrade operation, I copy data between two clusters, and finally, I switch cluster for read. When I switch it, it is important to switch only one buyer server, read server. It was called canary release. I always compare switched one server to rest of servers, Aerospike connections, transaction per second, ad spends. I checked whether new cluster switch is safe or not. This canary release is so comfortable for my engineers because it is very safe operation. Here are pros and the cons of two clusters in production. As I said before, canary release makes newer application safe. if I find strange things, then I could roll back to old application soon. 2 cluster makes my service more safe. For cluster failure, even if something wrong happened in active cluster, I can switch another cluster. Fortunately, we have not met with such sad situations. To create a new cluster is a valuable experience for my operation engineers. To create a new cluster, to operate a cluster without trouble is very important for our business. For that, to maintain operation scale is quite important. But there are some not good points using 2 clusters. Of course, hardware cost is double. Data inconsistency often happens. The system is more complex than single cluster. But it was a nice choice for me to run 2 clusters because we did not have any single stop of our system for 8 years. So here are some little tips for value design for backward compatibility. Aerospike store byte array. My application needs schema like integer ID and string name. For defining these like schema in a byte array, I use Google protocol buffers. The good point of protocol buffer is backward compatibility. In this case, newer client version 2 has additional column storing email in the value. So newer client version 2 is released step by step, canary release. In this time, old and new clients write data at the same time. Data version mixed in one Aerospike clusters. However, old and new clients read it well. Protocol buffer make value update additional column make very easy. Sometimes I add additional beans. Beans is Aerospike's useful function. When I add big data change, I use bean, but when I add small change, I change protocol buffer's schema. And finally, I introduce our in-house AI engine called VALIS-Engine. It predicts ad click rate and conversion rate in real time and predict user profile attribute like gender, ages, and interest. This our in-house AI engine uses Aerospike for learning model. Aerospike is suited for machine learning database. Here is a our AI engine system overview. For data store for machine learning, I use Impala on Hadoop and Aerospike. Impala on Hadoop has users add log, add historical log, like add impression, clicks, add conversion. And Aerospike has real-time user data, user status. This user data is updated by other system as previous mentioned. For learning, I first pull log data from Hadoop, sometimes summarize it. Next, I combine Hadoop data and Aerospike user data. This is an application join. Aerospike is so first, I can do application join for such big data. Using this learning model, I predict click rate, conversion rate. After, my buyer server determine bidding price, then bid at auction. As a result of auction, the logs stored in Hadoop. Then, next machine learning cycle starts again. I do this learning cycle hourly interval. The last slide is summary. From the viewpoint of Aerospike early customer, Aerospike speed, scalability, stability are very well. Hardware, operation, learning cost are very well, very low. So low cost, I'm happy. Cost is so low, I can run 2 clusters in production. 2 cluster environment are comfortable for my engineering team. Finally, our business has been continuous growing with Aerospike. Thank you so much. Okay.
We have some time for Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Yes.
Thank you for the great presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how much data, like gigabytes, terabytes, whatever it is that you're storing,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe how big average object sizes are, if you know.
Mm-hmm. So my other service is for Japan. So my data size, key size is less billion, 300 million key. So average value size is less than 10 kilobyte. Mm-hmm. Maybe total data size of the cluster is 2 terabyte. Mm-hmm. Here.
Question. Thanks for the great presentation. Question about the hotkey problem and how you solve that. You mentioned about batch writes and how you're solving it. How are you doing that? What's the way in which you solved the hotkey problem that you mentioned? Would you mind explaining a bit more of that? On the hotkey problem?
hotkey problem, yeah. Okay. So we implemented our client side, the logic. So our worker is over tens. So 10 clients write same key at the same time. So it's not good at that time and now. So in the client application logic, I sum up the value and reduce writing timing. And in addition, so I shuffle the key each client. So for reduce the same write to same key.
Any more questions? Matt?
In one of your slides, you mentioned a challenge of having multiple clusters in production was consistency.
Mm-hmm.
Would you, or are you considering strong consistency mode, or is that not good?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, two clusters in production have inconsistency, data consistency. So, but in other system, so a little inconsistency is capable. So, for data copy, I write, how can I say, our own application for copying data. And every hour, copying application is running. So maybe our system is more lead incentive. So it is okay to the less consistency. So this is why I can run in two clusters. So in that business situations.
Thank you for the talk.
Mhm.
Super interesting. I also have a consistency question. Do you have a sense of how much skew, how much difference there is between the two clusters over
Mhm.
time? And if so, how do you reason about that? How do you measure that? Is there any corrections you need to take?
So I mentioned canary release. Sometimes some RTB buyer reads another cluster. So I logged every bidding auction log. So and I store every log to the Hadoop. So I compare the log statics, mainly the bidding rate or win rate.
Did you look at XDR as an option for that?
Yes. Yeah. In the maybe 8 years ago, there's no XDR, and yeah, sometimes I consider adopt XDR, but so how can I say? To create a new cluster is comfortable for our teams. So, and I buy the new SSD and new hardware, and to create a new cluster, it's not bad. But maybe I use XDR for in the future.
We found that didn't have any outages or downtime
Mhm.
during the day,
stable and most unstable component in this architecture? According to your experience.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
What is the most stable and most unstable component in this architecture?
Component. Yeah.
Maybe you have some problems with everything you.
Yeah. Maybe most important, most stable component is the Aerospike. So other is a Java application. Other component is a Java application. So sometimes Java application causes a GC problem like that. So maybe in my system, most stable component is Aerospike. RabbitMQ is very stable, but sometimes, how can I say? RabbitMQ have contain too much more messages. Sometimes RabbitMQ down.
Any more questions?
If you don't mind me asking one more. You said that you were using Intel Optane.
Mm-hmm.
When you did the upgrade, do you mind talking about the performance increase that you saw, or what made you choose Optane?
Yes. 3 months ago, I changed SSD to Optane. So it was a very great performance. So how can I say? Aerospike benchmark to SCT. I cannot find the, how can I say, O0. So it's a very fast, and my Aerospike server's CPU graph, the I/O weight is disappeared.
Any more questions?
Thank you so much.